Wednesday. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Tomorrow, we will be broadcasting live from the Wizards Draft Party, Capital One Arena. I should really have the information on when the general public is allowed in. I do know that eventually that's a thing. I'll broadcasting all the way till 7 o'clock, 6:30. Our draft show starts. I'll do the first half hour with Linnell and Kristap. So very much looking forward to that. Unfortunately, if we get any Wizards executives on, I don't know that they'll be able to talk about any of the trades that they've made because none of this stuff is official yet. But we can tell you, if you are just tuning in and have not heard the rooster crowing about this, Kristap Porzingis is likely on his way out of town. Porzingis likely headed to the Celtics. Shams Charania of The Athletic reporting a deal is in the works between the Clippers, Celtics, and Wizards. And I will tell you that this deal is going to have to be complicated. And I will also tell you that this deal is likely not going to get anything great back for the Wizards, in part because the Celtics and Clippers don't have a lot to give up. I have on one of the trade machines created a trade that actually works. The Wizards, the pieces that we know are moving around are Marcus Morris from the Clippers, Kristap Porzingis from the Wizards, and Malcolm Brogdon from the Clippers. However, I will go ahead and maybe next. Actually, tell you what, I'm gonna recreate this trade in a second, and I'm gonna do it on a different computer so that I can have it be on the screen on YouTube. So we'll play with that in the next segment. I will tell you the more particulars of the trade. I will do big picture stuff real quick here, and a thought that I've had, sporadically over the last couple of days, but one that I think is important to this deal. Marcus Morris coming back is an interesting piece. And I realize that nobody's that's not a sexy statement. Nobody's buying season tickets because Marcus Morris is potentially coming back in the trade, or that Robert Covington could potentially come back in the trade from the Clippers. Those aren't players that exactly move the needle in the 2023 NBA. But one thing that I think is really important to keep in mind with this rebuild, when everyone is going to be focused on all of the young talent, is how does that young talent actually come together? How does it coalesce? These are human beings, specifically young men who need guidance. And when I say guidance, I don't mean because they're a bunch of lost souls who don't know anything and, the miscreants of the youth. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about what it takes to really win in the NBA. And there is a level of work and a level of professionalism that if you just haven't experienced it and there's no one around to show you, gets lost. You never will reach it. You can self-start as much as you want, but if you don't know where the line is that you're supposed to push to, how are you supposed to get there? And so a guy like Marcus Morris, who's been around a lot of winning teams in Boston and LA and in other places, a guy like Robert Covington, same thing. And by the way, Covington was a part of the process teams in Philly, so he knows what it's like to go through this. Poor him if he's got to do it again at this stage of his career. These players become very important, not as the pieces that will help you win, but as the pieces that will help the pieces that will help you win. Someone to be that veteran, someone to be that guide. It's something that Philly made a mistake on early on in the process. They didn't have enough of those people around. And some of the early guys in that process that maybe could have turned into better basketball players had they had vets, didn't. I think of a guy that I covered at Syracuse and happened to like a lot, Michael Carter-Williams. What if he had, who by the way, won Rookie of the Year that first year in Philly? He had some injuries, and he's back in the league, in and out of it the past couple of years with Orlando, and it's okay, he's still floating around the NBA. But for a guy who won Rookie of the Year, he never really developed from there. What if he had a veteran who was on his ass, locking him in the gym and being like, you're not leaving till you make 1,000 threes today? And I don't know if Michael did that work and just got unlucky or didn't, but I do know there wasn't someone around to hold him to that standard. And, eventually when it was time to be good for Philadelphia, J.J. Redick, for instance, was someone they targeted. And hilariously, J.J. mentioned on his pod the other day, he kind of wonders who the team is, whether it's in Orlando or someone that will pay a veteran a lot of money on a short-term deal, and he called it the J.J. Redick contract, to be someone that helps contribute to winning. JJ was still a very good player at some of his best years in Philadelphia, in fact, as a scorer. But really was there as much as a vet and someone to show them the way, someone who they knew had an impeachable work ethic, someone who's going to be very routine-oriented and can show Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons and those younger guys how to be a pro. It's why they targeted Al Horford, even though Horford didn't wind up working there. We need guys who are pros, who know how to take our young talent and lift it up. And so while, yes, the pieces that will ultimately help the Wizards become great are probably still in high school right now, for being frank. They are a couple years away from being here. Even the piece in this draft is someone that is probably going to be a rotation player down the line, unless they get lucky and, whoever they take at 8 turns out to be the next star. But if you get someone who's a high-end rotation player, a starter, non-star starter, a really good role player, that's a win at the 8th pick. But who's going to help that person develop the habits? Who's going to be the person to guide them along the way? And those are the kinds of pieces that you could acquire right now. And we will look at some of that when we try to piece together this reported trade from the Celtics and the Clippers to the Wizards next. Again, Kristap Porzingis reportedly on the way out to Boston. How does this trade come together? We'll try to math the math next here on the Hoffman Show. The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We have a really stacked show talking about a lot of different stuff, keeping tabs on the reporting from Shams Charania and The Athletic on the Kristap Porzingis trade. But later in the show, we will talk about the Nats and Orioles MASN deal with Chelsea Janes. We will also talk about the U.S. Women's National Team naming their World Cup roster with Jason Anderson, the Monumental Sports Network launch, NBC Sports Washington flipping over with Scott Allen. Never read the comments because it is a Wednesday, so plenty of stuff coming here on the show. Right now, though, have you ever built an NBA trade from scratch? Well, I guess it's not from scratch. We have a recipe, I guess, but we're going to have to do a little seasoning here to make this work. So what I'm going to do, if you are watching on YouTube, you get to follow as I do this. Occasionally we do this where it really does behoove you to watch the YouTube stream at youtube.com/@theteam980. I then look at my computer to make sure that the stream is actually working and the audio is up and the whole deal. We are indeed streaming. Hi, Internet. We also will put this up on demand on my YouTube page later tonight, youtube.com/@CraigHoffman. Of course, unless it's not relevant anymore because this trade happens. But let's try to build it. So I'm going to go ahead and pop up on the screen the Fanspo, which to me is the best one. I will give them a shout out. Best trade machine that I have found, in part because ESPN's does not have salaries for 2023, 2024 yet. Also, this has all of the picks. So what do we know already? We know that Malcolm Brogdon is going to the Clippers, and we know that Kristaps Porzingis is going to the Celtics, and we know that Marcus Morris is going to the Wizards. Now, the problem is if you just try this trade, it is going to fail because there's not enough salary being exchanged to all of these places. Because of the way the NBA cap rules work, you've got to exchange, depending on how many players or how far you are over the cap, 100% salaries or 125% is allowable. So, for instance, the Celtics are unable to complete this trade. Since they are a tax-paying team, they're only able to take back 125% of the salary they are sending out, plus $100K. So if they're getting, or if they're sending out Brogdon at $22.5 million, they can only take back $28.2. Porzingis is $36. The Clippers, also a tax-paying team, can only take back $21.4 million in salary because they are sending out Marcus Morris at $17, and taking back Brogdon at $22 is $1.1 million too much. So what we're going to do is we're going to start playing with this. And, of course, then we will get to the draft picks part of this is where the Wizards actually are kind of care what's going on. There's some rules around that as well. But let's just do the money part first. Let's just do the players part. And this is, I think, a really great exercise to show you how complicated these things are. And there's also, by the way, financial ramifications that go even beyond this. How much tax do you want to pay? Do you want to go into what's called the second apron, a new feature of the new CBA that makes it even more punitive to be that much? So, or to be that expensive of a payroll. So, let's see what else we can do here. The Wizards don't need to send out anymore. They're sending out the most expensive piece. So we need more pieces coming back to the Wizards probably because they actually have cap space, which is helpful. And we need more money going to Boston or coming out from Boston. So let's do that part first. The easiest way to do this is a way that I actually didn't anticipate being on the table. But in reading the Athletic story, it seems that Danilo Gallinari is potentially on the block here. I thought they were going to really want to bring him back, but if you're bringing in Porzingis, a very tall shooter is no longer something you necessarily need. So he has a player option that he's already opted in for, as far as I know. He's going to take that, and by the way, he probably would because he's coming off an injury. So you trade him, let's say, to the Clippers. They could use another shooter to replace Morris. Let's see what happens there. If we try that trade, is that good enough to work? Nope. The Clippers can only take back $21.4 million in salary. They're now taking back nearly $30. But we fixed the Boston side of this. So now this is where it gets fun / this is where this gets hard. We now have to say, okay, who from the Clippers goes to the Wizards because the Wizards are the team that actually can take on salary. So that's where you get, if you're lucky, you get Terrence Mann, and Wizards fans, you might see that all over the place where people are going to be like, oh, Terrence Mann. They're not giving up Terrence Mann. He's awesome. He's 26. You're not getting Terrence Mann. What you could get, though, is Robert Covington or Nicholas Batum. Take your pick. I'll take Covington for no reason whatsoever. I'll just take Covington. 6'7" forward who's been a part of some rebuilds before. He's got 1 year, $11 million remaining. We're going to trade him to the Wizards. Let's try this trade now. And voila. Okay, now we have a framework. Now we have Porzingis to the Celtics, Marcus Morris and Robert Covington to the Wizards, Malcolm Brogdon, Danilo Gallinari to the Clippers. Great, right? Well, the Wizards are going, hey, wait a second. We're not just giving you Porzingis for Marcus Morris and Robert Covington. Why would we do that? We're not interested in that. So then you get to the picks. Well, the Clippers are kind of helping to make this happen. So I don't think the Clippers are going to give anything up. If anything, maybe you get a second rounder for the Clippers. So let's take the 2024 second rounder that the Clippers have from Toronto. And as a thank you to the Wizards for taking Marcus Morris and Robert Covington off their hands and allowing them to get Malcolm Brogdon, they get a second round thank you. Unfortunately, when you flip over to the Celtics, they don't really have anything. The 30th pick in the draft this year is the Bucks. That's with the Clippers. Like, that's the best first round pick between all these teams outside of the Wizards picks. You're not getting that. So you can either take the 35th pick in this draft, which is a second rounder, or a 2024 first rounder. Thing is, I actually don't know if that 2024 first rounder is on the table because of something called the Stepien rule. Let's go ahead and give it a shot, though. Let's try this trade. And, okay, it does work. At least it says it does. But because the Celtics don't have a 2023 first rounder, I don't think they can even trade their 2024 first rounder, I guess, until draft night. So this trade would have to wait. Realistically, I'm also like, I don't know if I want the Celtics pick next year because they're going to be awesome. So let's go back. Let's take out that 2024 first round pick and undo trade. 2025 first rounder, trade to Wizards. Try trade. And there to me is something that I would accept. This is dependent on Danilo Gallinari being okay with this because he has a player option. If not, the Celtics could include Peyton Pritchard and like Luke Cornett or something like that. They can get that $6 million in salary that they need to make this work back. But that's the kind of stuff that Will Dawkins and this front office is doing today, is trying to figure out how this math works. How do they actually get a deal in place that helps them get their long-term goals, that helps them get to a place where they're getting the right veterans back who are going to be good influences in their locker room, but are not long-term salary commitments. And that it truly, here's the other part, is the best deal on the table. Why rush into something? Porzingis can opt in. You could say, hey, we're going to wait till tomorrow. But to me, I don't know how much better you're going to do than this, where you get a Covington and a Morris, two good vets. You get a second rounder. You get a first rounder from Boston, and you unload Porzingis and start over. You're going to need a third team. You're going to need someone who's got the requisite salaries they're trying to unload. And there just aren't a lot of options that, by the way, then also have a good pick that you would actually want in return. So that's the exercise. What are your thoughts on it? 301-230-0980. We can take a call or two real quick, and then we get to Chelsea Janes coming up at the bottom of the hour. Ray's in Frederick. Ray, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. There we go. All right, Ray, we got you now. Ray.
What's up, man?
All
Thank you for taking my call.
Yeah, you got it.
So I was listening to you yesterday after I said something. In reality, it's basically Ernie Grant for 15 years. We went through this mess, basically. He is a big, problem. We got rid of him, and then we got Tommy, who's kind of like, I don't know. Basically, he's trying to do something, but kind of like, hey, this looks like Ernie, so let's do something else. And basically, that's what I feel.
Okay, thanks for the call, Ray. Essig, about every third time. By the way, ladies and gentlemen, Matt Essig in for one final day before Anthony is back tomorrow.
Howdy, folks.
There are some days I take calls, and it's awesome. There are some days I take calls, and I don't know why I take calls.
Yeah, I can understand that. That was
not really helpful for the show.
Nah, wasn't really on track.
Mm.
We appreciate you. If you
we appreciate you listening.
Yeah.
But if you don't really have something super insightful to say,
keep listening.
You can just listen.
You might find something that you have more insightful down the road.
Yeah. I'm not saying never call. I'm just saying,
pick your battles.
That was a call maybe for when Tommy got fired, which was a long time ago. 301-230-098. I'm going to go caller redemption here. We got
where you calling from?
Matt, you forgot to turn your mic off there, buddy. Call screener. Now we're going nuts with the calls. But we don't have time for this because Chelsea's coming up next. I'm going to have time for one call, and then we'll take more later in the show. I do promise to circle back to calls. All right, let's go to Vaughn. Vaughn, this is your one chance to redeem all callers for the history of time. Off to a great start. Vaughn, there we go. All right, I think that was my fault. All right, Vaughn, now we got you.
All right, Craig. So, question. I love what the Wizards are doing. I'm glad that we seem for the first time to have identity of what we want to do. My question is, what young guys do you think we'll build around? And second question is, do you think we can take a guy like Monte Morris, and trade him to Memphis for the young guy, what's his name, Lofton, Kenny Lofton, and also sign and trade with Kuzma to Golden State to get their young guys? I just want to know what direction are we starting to rebuild around? What young guys are we going to push that later down the line?
Vaughn, it's a really good question, and it's kind of a long-term answer. The short answer I'll give you quickly, and then I think that's a good topic to get back to, not only today but tomorrow, is what young guys are we going to build around? I don't know, and neither do they, because that's the nature of young players, is there's not exactly a target right now. I think the target is to acquire draft capital, and there's some junior in high school right now that's the future star of the Washington Wizards, but that guy's 3 years from making the NBA. I don't know who he is. They might have some scouts who are way ahead of the game and know who that guy is, or they have an idea, but they don't know right now. Clearly, you want to acquire some pieces that are starting now that can help you in the future, but I think the thing that Wizards fans have to get uncomfortable with, and I was explaining this to Russell actually earlier when he yelled at me in the hallway and then brought me in on his show. You can't think about right now for this team. Right now doesn't matter. The mountain you have to climb is Mount Everest. You haven't left base. You haven't gotten to base camp yet. And I think that's the thing that we have to understand is this is a very long-term project that requires asset accumulation, slowly chipping away at making progress, and then at some point, the big centerpiece will come. It's hard to start with the centerpiece. Could you I think the Lofton deal to Memphis is very possible. I don't know if they've talked about it, but it's the kind of thing that makes sense. Especially if they want to trade Tyus Jones, they need kind of that starter bench hybrid point guard with Ja being suspended for 25 games. And Monte's perfect for that. I also think that Kuzma to Golden State for their young guys, I don't know if that's going to be enough. Man, if you could steal Kuminga from them, that would be sweet. But I don't think that they are ready to totally punt on that. I think you could do Jordan Poole. I don't know that you want Jordan Poole. I would imagine you probably don't want Jordan Poole. But that's a different story. And also the contract, I don't think that exactly matches up. But the Wizards cap space allows them to do that kind of thing. If you want to take the flyer on Jordan Poole, Wizards could do it. I just don't think that is probably a something that the Warriors want to do at this time and something the Wizards want to do at this time. But who knows? Maybe Kuz wants to go to Golden State. He can't sign there. So the sign and trade becomes the only option. And maybe there is something that they can do. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. 3 minutes from now, Chelsea Janes talks about the Nats-Orioles MASN dispute finally being resolved. About 10 minutes from now, Jason Anderson joins the show, Soccer Wire, to talk about the U.S. Women's National Team's roster being named for the 2023 World Cup, which is in a whopping 29 days. Right now, though, my pleasure to welcome back to the show one of my favorite guests whom we don't get to have on very often because, well, we just don't get a chance to talk a lot of baseball on this show. But major news yesterday, and just how major, well, she's going to tell us. It's Chelsea Janes from the Washington Post. Chelsea, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am well. So, the Nats and Orioles settled their dispute over MASN and the rights and everything yesterday. There's been a lot happening around a lot of different things that have had my attention, and sometimes I ask guests what happened, and I kind of already know, but they're the expert. Chelsea, I have not had a chance to read a damn thing on this. Can you tell me what actually happened yesterday? Because is this the door that unlocks the sale of the Nationals, or just like some small step? What actually happened yesterday?
So yesterday, or I guess a few days before, the Orioles paid the Nationals the rest of what the Nats had been owed from 2012 to 2016, just those 5 years. It's a big deal because the Orioles had not wanted to pay that full amount, and they had taken it to the courts, and there had been appeals, and the whole thing had taken about 10 years to get to the point where the Orioles finally said, I guess we have no other way to get out of this. We got to pay them. But yeah, there are future deals that are going to have to be figured out every 5 years. They figure out how much the Nats deserve. The Orioles are supposed to pay them. But the idea is that once the Orioles kind of got all the legal challenges out of their system for this 5-year period, they'll be less likely to try that again for the next few. So hopefully the Nats will be able to kind of get their TV rights money a little bit more easily than they have had for the last 10 years or so.
So my understanding from following this for the last couple of years is it's not just about getting this money. Like, cash is nice. Getting paid is nice. But it's also some sort of precedent that kind of establishes the barriers of what they do and don't get so that they can help predict forward and actually put a value on the franchise as well, right? Am I correct in that?
Yeah, exactly. And to your first question, which I forgot to answer part of, I think the idea was always if you could get this MASN stuff figured out, then anyone who wanted to buy the Nats, wouldn't have to worry about buying into this crazy litigation that had gone on for years, but also would have an idea of like, okay, so how much can we reasonably expect for the future 5-year increments? Now, I don't know that the second part is true as much anymore. The cable revenues are down a ton. Other companies that are broadcasting Major League Baseball games over cable are going bankrupt. It's just never going to be $300 million for a 5-year period again. But the idea is that now that the Orioles probably don't have a lot of more appeals in them, now that they're not going to be fighting over as much money, a future owner can look at this and say, okay, it's weird that the Orioles own our TV rights, but there's a system in place that's probably going to go fairly smoothly by which we'll figure out how much we're owed and we'll get it. And, the worst and the messy stuff is behind us.
Chelsea Janes, Major League Baseball reporter for the Washington Post, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Do you think this now opens the door for the Nationals to ultimately negotiate their rights away from the Orioles and MASN, or the Orioles, on that part of it, are they dug in?
Yeah, I think the deal that they signed when the Nats came kind of made it very hard for anyone to get out of it. I think that was kind of the goal for Peter Angelos when he allowed, or when he, kind of signed the deal, was like, no, we're going to own these rights forever, and no one person can get us out of this deal. Normally the commissioner has this best interest of baseball clause where he can kind of do whatever he wants by himself. They even said in the agreement we can't use that, so that one person can't give the rights back to the Nationals. So I think they're going to operate in this framework where the Orioles own the rights. But, as far as I understand it, those aren't streaming rights. They're cable broadcast rights. So maybe that'll become relevant. But it's definitely, something that has changed the equation a little bit.
It's funny you say that because in, 22 minutes, your colleague from the Post, Scott Allen, will join us to talk about the Monumental Sports Network launch, which obviously is a linear channel flipping from NBC Sports Washington. But in reading Scott's story, it's pretty clear that there's a huge app development, streaming type of vision that they have for the long term over at Monumental, which is a big wind up to asking, do you think that Ted Leonsis would still be interested in the Nationals with all of the things you just said, where he's trying to build this network and, his teams being featured on it when he knows he can't have the actual linear television rights to the Nationals if he were to buy them?
I think he's definitely still interested. We knew a few months ago he kind of tried to buy MASN. He tried to say, I'll take care of all this. I'll just spend on it. And
honestly, go Ted on that one, please.
Right. And the Orioles said, no, we're not going to do that. But I definitely think he'll still be interested. I think whether there's a realistic chance of it or not, someone like him always thinks that that's something that maybe they can negotiate or somehow pull off. And, the vision for him has always been kind of this big super network. So I don't know quite how he expects to get there, but everything I understand is that regardless of what TV availability there would be, he's still very interested in buying the Nationals, and maybe just getting the litigation out of the way on the MASN side could loosen that up and help that happen.
Chelsea Janes with us for just another minute or two here on the Hoffman Show. All right, so prediction time, something journalists, hardcore beat journalists especially, really love. 2 years from now, who owns the Nationals?
I think Ted Leonsis somehow.
Okay.
It's him or the Learners, I think, at this point, unless something changes pretty dramatically.
Okay. That's straightforward enough. I thought I would get a more winding answer, but it makes sense to me. Ted wants it, and he's got a lot of money, and what Ted wants, when you have a lot of money, you tend to get. All right, baseball question real quick on the way out. Why is everyone so mad at Victor Robles?
I think in the short term, they felt like he should have charged that ball last night a little bit harder. I think in the big picture, just a lot of mental mistakes over the years. He's someone they really counted on. They thought he was better than Juan Soto, and he hasn't developed in large part, I think, because they feel like he's making the same focused kind of mistakes over and over again. And I think to baseball people, those feel like the things you should be able to control.
So is that a scouting error on their part? Because I feel like sometimes when you have players like this in any sport, you just get frustrated. I'm like, no, that's on you. Like, that's who they are. You missed the scout. Is that a scouting issue, or is this actually something where Robles, if he was, is it in him to focus and play at that level?
I think it's a fair question. I think if you were to kind of be really straightforward about it, it's probably a development issue on the Nats' part more than anything. But, who's to say? They obviously haven't found a way to kind of get the messages they want to stick. Maybe no one else would either, but without that information, I would say they're probably looking at themselves wondering what they have not been able to do with him.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Chelsea Janes, Washington Post, read her work, WashingtonPost.com/sports. Always great to talk to you, man. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Chelsea Janes, everybody. When we get back, Jason Anderson joins us talking U.S. Women's National Team as the World Cup is just 29 days away, and we finally have in our sweet little hands the roster for Team USA. That's next. First, what's trending? Our pleasure now to welcome to the show my guy Jason Anderson. Been writing about DC soccer for a long time, and today's a pretty important day. Just 29 days to the Women's World Cup in Australia and New Zealand, and we finally have Vlatko Andonovski's roster. And we'll get to the DC side of it in a moment. There's 4 Washington Spirit players ultimately going. I think that is a bit of a surprise of which 4. But Jason, I saw your tweet earlier as soon as it came out. You're like, this roster's a little weird. Why did you describe it as weird?
I guess I would start with where the positions that were concentrated on and the positions that were maybe they're kind of rolling the dice on some players staying fit for the whole tournament. Only 3 center backs on this team and only 2 full-time center backs. Emily Sonnet has spent this entire season playing defensive midfield.
Right.
If you remember her from the Spirit, of course, she was kind of playing mostly center back here, but has played all over.
And with the national team, she's mostly played on the outside.
Yes, she's been like a utility defender for a long time, but a lot of those minutes have been right back, left back. And then in the midfield, 3 different number 10s, 3 different playmakers on a team that generally only plays 1 and sometimes plays 0. So it's a big concentration of the players everyone loves to see. Who doesn't want to see Rose Lavelle and Ashley Sanchez and Savannah DeMello? But a big question for Vlatko is, are you going to play all of them? And if so, how?
Right. So the midfield has been something that has been a bit of a conundrum. Our good friend Andre Carlisle's been on the show, and he has lamented Vlatko's midfield choices for sure. Like, when I don't say when they open, but I guess they'll probably play their best lineup in the opener, and then they'll probably do some squad rotation, and then ultimately they'll settle on a lineup for like the knockout round games. But like when you get to that moment, when you get to soup meets nuts, and it's time to play a real opponent with your future on the line or your World Cup status on the line, who do you think ultimately is playing in that midfield?
I think right now, the lineup that Vlatko has in his mind, that if everything works out and everyone's healthy, it would be Rose Lavelle, Andy Sullivan, Lindsey Horan. Andy Sullivan as the most defensive midfielder, Lindsey Horan kind of in between the two, Lavelle as an attacking midfielder, though he has shifted. It used to be sort of Lavelle and Horan ahead and Sullivan alone as a lone defensive midfielder. They've shifted now to have Horan closer to Sullivan. There is competition between Sullivan and Julie Ertz, who has made a late return to playing after almost 2 years out after becoming a mom. There are a lot of moms on this team, which is pretty awesome to see. But there's real competition for that spot. And Lavelle hasn't played since April, I want to say, and it was an injury that they thought was minor and have been sort of like, oh, well, don't worry about it. It's a minor injury. And then all of a sudden, late last month, it's a setback, and now no one really knows how healthy she is. Vlatko said, don't worry, everything's fine, but no one has any information to know that it's fine.
Yeah, when DeMello who, for those that don't know, pretty remarkable story, young player, their second year in the NWSL. She has actually never made an appearance for the U.S. Women's Senior National Team. She will become the first uncapped, as they call it, player to make her debut for the U.S. Women's National Team if she were to play at this World Cup in a generation. Shannon Box, who I believe will be a part of the coverage, or has been a part of the coverage on like the lead-up games on HBO and TNT, she was the last one to do it. So her name gets leaked that she's making it. I thought Rose was not going to make the roster because she wasn't going to be healthy. So kind of who is with DeMello in, who do you feel like got left out that you would have expected to be on this roster? And was it even a midfielder, or is it how they construct the roster elsewhere?
I think it's more towards the latter. DeMello is the 7th midfielder on this roster, and I haven't checked every single squad over the past couple of years, but if you ask me anecdotally, I would say it's been 6 midfielders over and over again. Maybe I'm missing one in there where they might have taken a 7th, but this is the surprise that they're going with a 7th midfielder. It's not a surprise based on DeMello's form. She's been outstanding, human highlight reel kind of player. But it is a surprise that he decided to go with the additional midfielder. And I think the pull is kind of in 2 different directions. I mentioned the lack of center backs. Julie Ertz on this team is probably the 4th center back on top of being a defensive midfielder. So they might be a little concerned there numbers wise. The other player, and this brings it close to DC, I think Ashley Hatch is missing out on this roster for several reasons, but one of them is Vlatko ultimately deciding he needed that one more midfielder.
Yeah. Jason Anderson, writer, Pro Soccer Wire, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Been, again, writing about not just DC soccer, but soccer MLS, NWSL, all around the world for a long time. Always great to have him on the show. So this is where I get salty on a personal level because Hatchie is someone I consider a good friend, and I am so beyond bummed for her. I am biased, but I'm not stupid. I don't know what else she was supposed to do in the league. She has just scored goals, which is her job. And she's done it in a season with the Spirit where she probably hasn't gotten the ball as much as she has in years past. The goal is not necessarily to feed her like it has been in years past, and yet she just always finds a way to be in the right place at the right time. Her assist numbers are up this year. I think she's been phenomenal here in Washington. I think Mark Parsons has been very happy with her. That said, she's born at the wrong time in the wrong country because I don't know who you take off the roster either. I'm so bummed for her, but if you put your analytical hat on, why do you think Ashley Hatch is not the fifth Spirit player on this roster?
Well, it's good that you're asking me because, like, literally right before he came on, I published an article talking about the snubs, and that section is the longest one. The section discussing Hatch because I don't think there's much else she could have done. I think you're right to say that. She's among the Golden Boot leaders in the NWSL. The data, the underlying data backs up her expected goals are the best in the entire league. Even if you take penalty kicks away, which penalty kicks in a knockout tournament, you want good. I mean, they've got Megan Rapinoe. She's an ace at penalties, but Hatch has not missed one in, I think, over 2 years, and she's taken a lot. It's been a busy time for her in that role. Even if you take those off the table, the only player that plays regular minutes that's ahead of her is Sophia Smith, who is in like otherworldly form.
Yeah, once you take out the superhumans, then it's just Hatchie, but Sophia's on a different planet right now.
Yes. So yeah, I think part of Hatch's problem is that Vlatko wanted to bring Alyssa Thompson along, not necessarily as direct competition because they're different types of players, but Thompson's speed is on another level. She might be the fastest player on the entire team. And she's only 18, but that means that her career with this team is going to go, 10 plus years. And you look at her now and you say, this is a player that's going to be a dominant international player for a long time. I understand the rationale to bring her along, to use this World Cup to prepare her for future World Cups. The flip side of that is Megan Rapinoe coming along. We know that this is almost certainly, in her own words, this is almost certainly her last go of any of these tournaments. It was kind of up in the air as to whether she'd even stick around for one more. She's had some injury problems, but I would point to the end of last season when she was fit for about 2 months there at the end of the year. She was unstoppable. It was kind of like, this is 2019 World Cup Megan Rapinoe. I think her coach with OL Reign, Laura Harvey, said that she might have even been above that form for a stretch of that time. And her voice in the locker room is immense. And this is a team that just lost Becky Sauerbrunn, surprise exclusion due to an injury that just would not heal. So I think there are non-soccer factors that are understandable that would lead Vlatko to take the two of them over Hatch. But at the same time, like I said, 7 midfielders instead of 6. The specificity of some of those players coming in. This is also a team taking 4 specialist fullbacks plus Sonnet, as we talked about, to add a 5th. They've generally only carried 3 for a lot of the last couple of years. So there are a lot of spots where Vlatko really chose to overload, and all of those choices kind of add up to Hatch being probably player 24 out of 23. It's a super harsh decision that I really don't know what else she could have done. There are a lot of things that are completely out of her control that went against her here. And I hope the U.S. doesn't pay for it, but they might find themselves having wished they included her instead of the roster structure that was, it's not crazy, but
yeah,
it's risky.
Yeah, no, I think that's well put. And, unfortunately, this is the second straight World Cup where a beloved Spirit player is player 24. Andy Sullivan was the last cut last time. She's on this roster. Ashley Sanchez on this roster. Aubrey Kingsbury, a surprise. We don't really have time to get into that, but huge congrats to Aubrey, who's probably been the best goalkeeper in the league the last, 5 years, and yet somehow this is her first World Cup, and she has mostly not been in the team, but gets the call here. The one I do want to ask you about is Trin. With Mallory Swanson, formerly Mallory Pugh, for those that don't know, but may have watched the last World Cup and are kind of tuning back in now. Mal had a really, really severe knee injury. She is not on this roster because she is not healthy and will not be for a long time. Do you think Trinity Rodman is the one who takes her place and starts and is ultimately, like, if the U.S. makes it there, starting in the World Cup final?
I think this is really maybe the biggest lineup question right now is Trinity Rodman or Lynn Williams. I think Sophia Smith and Alex Morgan are going to be the starters in 2 of the 3 forward roles. I think it's down to whether Vlatko wants to lean more towards a press-heavy lineup. I might get some flack from Mark Parsons because I think he maybe disagrees with me a little on whether Rodman or Williams is the better pressing forward. If he wants to go more pressing-oriented, I think he'll choose Williams. If he wants a little more creativity, he'll choose Rodman, and it might come down to who they're lining up against in the knockouts. This might be a battle between these 2 players who are both again, in special form at 2 very different teams. They're both playing really well. But it might be a really, really narrow battle throughout this World Cup where it comes down to what do we need on the day? What do we need? Do we want to prioritize creativity early, or do we want to have it in our back pocket for the last 30 minutes?
Yeah, definitely. And Pino is kind of that perfect creative player in the final 30. That's going to be her role. But ultimately, we'll see. 29 days from now, it gets underway. You're definitely going to want to be reading Jason Anderson's work, not only up until then, but through the tournament as well. If you want more on the snubs, including more on Hatchie, you can read it at Pro Soccer Wire. And it's at Jason DC Soccer, correct, on Twitter?
That's right.
All right, so make sure that you're following him. Create your World Cup list, put Jason on it, and then go from there. Jason, always appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Craig. Anytime.
All right, Jason Anderson, everybody, with us here on The Hoffman Show. When we get back, Scott Allen from the Washington Post joins us, and he is going to discuss the Ted Leonsis makeover of NBC Sports Washington, Monumental Sports Network, coming to a television near you. So again, tomorrow we'll have the draft party. Doors at 6:30. I will be there broadcasting live from 4 to 7. Naki and Linnell, who are hosting our draft show, will be there with me from 6:30 to 7, and then they will take the reins from there. I'll hang out for a little bit afterwards, say hello. So if you want to come say what's up, talk a little Wizards, come see us tomorrow, Capital One Arena. And again, as Essex said, beautifully free and open to the fans. Something tomorrow will probably be on NBC Sports Washington. That's soon going to be Monumental Sports Network. That is the main story today. It is time now for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Joining us, Scott Allen of the Washington Post, of course, the DC Sports Blog. And Scott, technically your beat on all the local media types of things. And we get the news today that we've known is coming for a long time. NBC Sports Washington is going to rebrand as Monumental Sports Network. This was always coming after Ted Leonsis bought it. But ultimately, through your eyes, what does this mean?
Yeah, good to be here, Craig. No real surprises today, I would say. I mean, as you mentioned, ever since Ted purchased the remaining control of NBC Sports Washington last August, they said a rebrand was coming. They said an investment in the network was coming. And today, I guess we finally get to see some of the details of what that will look like, because we basically went through last Capitals and Wizards season with things looking pretty much the same, both on the NBC Sports Washington website, on the broadcasts. Today we get the new name, which is really kind of an old name because it's what the digital platform for Monumental Sports and Entertainment was called when it launched in 2016. But I think there are some exciting elements in there, both to the live game broadcast where we're talking more mic'd up players and coaches, new camera angles, and then something that the network has been lacking in recent years in terms of original programming. So magazine-style shows about the Caps and Wizards, a countdown show, airing of classic Wizards, Capitals, and Mystics games and such, and a new, maybe the highlight of it all, the biggest name anyway, a new interview series hosted by Potomac, Maryland's Rachel Nichols.
Yeah, I thought there was a great quote in your story where I think it was Zach Leonsis said, I tell my staff I don't want air fryer commercials in the middle of the day anymore, which, I feel like for the previous times we've had you on the show, an air fryer commercial is something we possibly could have discussed during a segment.
Absolutely. Before I talked to Zach about this, I actually turned on NBC Sports Washington to see what was airing at noon on a random weekday. And no joke, it was some program called the Larry King Prostate Report. So for him to then make that air fryer joke, I was like, yeah, there's a lot of junk filling the airwaves on that channel outside of game coverage. So I think that's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Scott Allen, Washington Post with us. So from where I sit, this is big time positive, big time negative type of thing. And I think that the investment they're making is incredible. I think as a consumer of the game, you ultimately want like the best product. The fact that the sideline reporters are going to always be there, these mic'd up segments, the kind of access is incredible. It's the kind of stuff you dream of having as a consumer. There's also, for lack of a better way to put it, the state media element of it. How much do you think the fact that the team owner is the same as the network owner truly affects the coverage? Forget being critical of roster moves and stuff. When we keep it in the box of the game. Like how free do you feel like the NBC Sports Washington, soon to be Monumental Sports talent is to, be real if there's poor performances, especially in light of the fact that the Wizards are probably not going to be good for a while?
Yeah. I think that's going to be one of the more interesting things to watch going forward, because it's a question people have been raising since Ted bought 1/3 of, I think, what was then Comcast Sportsnet or NBC Sports Washington back in 2016. I think if come January and the Wizards are 30 games under 500 and everything's, flowers and rainbows on the game broadcast with, Chris Miller talking about the team, that can and should be, called out and made fun of. It won't be, I don't think, by Monumental Sports Network. employees. But yeah, I think that's absolutely something to watch. I think traditionally, even for, I think TV broadcasts, teams that have relationships with these networks, even if they're not wholly owned by the owners of those teams, they've traditionally been a little bit more, with more of a homer slant than other forms of media. But yeah, in this case, it'll be certainly something to watch because it is a more interesting situation with, Ted Leonsis' Monumental Sports and Entertainment owns these three teams that it's broadcasting games on.
Well, is there precedent for this? I mean, I guess Yes Network in New York is owned by the Yankees.
Yeah.
Like, what's kind of the precedent for this level of control over? And because it's not just the game broadcast, Scott. Like, there's not another local regional sports net in New York. There's SNY. There's Yes. Like there's and the way New York operates, everyone wants to be mad at the team anyway. But like in DC, it's NBC Sports Washington, soon to be Monumental Sports Network. And that's the only like local regional sports TV game in town. Yeah. So like, what does that mean for, kind of the media ecosystem and what precedent do we have for it?
Yeah. In terms of number of teams under the control, I don't know that there is precedent. You mentioned Yes Network, and that's what immediately came to mind when the purchase was completed last August. I think, kind of getting to your question, some more fallout of this is in terms of what teams Monumental Sports Network is choosing to cover. I think it was no secret from the start that they were going to invest more in the teams that they own, and they've done that. I mean, we've already seen, as I mentioned in the piece today, and my colleague Ben Strauss had reported about a few months ago, the Commanders coverage on NBCSportsWashington.com had basically faded completely away. And we find that the team didn't reach a deal with Monumental to continue pregame and postgame coverage this year. I think that's going to be really interesting to see whether, Zach Leonsis told me ahead of this story coming out that they have no plans for a football-focused show. Which seems silly for any network to ignore talking about the NFL and specifically a local network talking about the local NFL team. So I think it's going to be really interesting to watch in the next few months when the Commanders sale is finalized, if some sort of deal can be reached where the Commanders will again have a presence on the network as they had for years when it was, Comcast Sportsnet, then NBC Sports Washington.
Scott Allen at Washington Post with us here on the Team 980. All right, time for the incestuous question, Scott. The Junkies are still going to be simulcast, and of course now they are the morning show not only on 106.7 The Fan, our Odyssey brethren, but on this station as well with the simulcast. This might be a better question for my bosses, but like, what does it mean for them? And that relationship is kind of the one entity that is independent, not something that is produced by Monumental.
Yeah, that was one of my main questions for Zach and him talking about sort of this original programming that was going to fill, the time before games and, what it used to be used for infomercials. And obviously the Junkies, that's a long time slot in the mornings that I was curious if it was going to continue once the rebrand takes effect in September. And he said it is. And then also, I guess, news that is pertinent to you and Commanders fans out there and related to 106.7 The Fan. I asked also about the recently rebranded Beltway Football podcast,
right?
Which started at NBC Sports Washington with obviously JP Finley, Mitch Tischler, and Pete Haley, who really were producing most of the daily Commanders coverage for NBC Sports Washington. And so while there's not going to be a football-focused show broadcast on the network, Zach Leonsis said that the podcast will continue under the Monumental Sports Network umbrella, which again, I think that just kind of adds to the intrigue over, is Commanders coverage really gone for good on Monumental Sports Network, or is there a chance that it comes back in some form down the road?
Well, there's nothing going on over there. There's no changes in leadership. There's no potential changes in business personnel. So, clearly everything is going to stay status quo forever.
That's right.
There's
that
something
goes to the Nats too, right?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And actually, that's something else. We have your colleague Chelsea Janes on the show today talking about the MASN deal. Like, is that the key that unlocks, the ability to sell the Nationals? Could the Nationals become Ted Leonsis' team or another? There's a lot of obviously things down the road there. When we get to those bridges, we'll cross them and we'll call you back. For right now, though, one of the more interesting things that I thought came out of your piece in the reporting and kind of their plans that have been unveiled here is the Manning cast type of idea. How do we do a simultaneous broadcast, a second screen, a second option broadcast? What are the plans for those? Like, who's going to be on them? How often they happen? And also, where are they going to air if obviously the main game is going to be on the main station?
Yep. All great questions. And basically what Zach Leonsis said is that the alternate feeds are really going to take effect once this brand new studio opens adjacent to Capital One Arena sometime around the new year, and by which point Monumental Sports Network anticipates announcing more details of their revamped digital platform. I think a lot of today's news is about the programming that's going to be changed and introduced on the linear channel. And from the start, they said they wanted to invest in that linear channel. But I think down the road, the greater room for growth and the way that this was headed once the purchase was made was them sort of reimagining their digital platform, which again had launched in 2016 with things like Capital City Go-Go, and you could pay for Mystics games. It was subscription based. But I think we're headed to a point where fans will be able to pay for over-the-top direct-to-consumer Capitals and Wizards games without a cable subscription, which they can't do now. And when you do that on the digital platform, you could have options for these alternate feeds where, as I mentioned in the piece, and Zach talked about a Manning cast style deal where you have, former Bullets and Wizards greats sitting around, and yes, you're ostensibly watching the game, but they're kind of, talking about other things, sharing stories, their thoughts on the team. He estimated that starting not this season, but the following season, roughly 100 games between the Capitals and Wizards would have that alternate feed.
Wow.
And it kind of reminds me of, what the Clippers did. They announced earlier this year something called Clipper Vision. I don't know if you saw this, but basically you could pay, if you're a Clippers fan, you can pay $200 a year. You get access to roughly 70 Clippers broadcasts. You don't get the national broadcast, but included in that access, you can watch the game essentially 6 different ways. You can either just watch the straight broadcast, you can watch a Manning cast style thing, you could watch something called Court Vision that displays augmented reality with like shot probabilities in real time and such. So I would not be surprised if Monumental doesn't roll out something like that. But they weren't prepared to talk about the revamped digital experience yet, but that's where the alternate feed experience would take place.
Scott Allen, Washington Post with us, of course, DC Sports Blog. The big news today, Monumental Sports, rebranding NBC Sports Washington as Monumental Sports Network. And that is September, right, is when that officially switches over?
That's right. Sometime in September. Yep. Ahead of the preseasons.
So where does this all go? And like what, I mean, to a point, Scott, I guess the question is like, what's the point of all this? This is obviously a business venture. Ted Leonsis wants to make money. He was very clear at the Wizards intro presser. Like he sees himself as the head of this giant conglomerate that includes basketball teams, includes a hockey team. It includes the esports team. Like he sees himself as over kind of this fiefdom, kingdom, whatever word you want to use, to describe this giant collection of assets, including multiple high-level premier professional sports teams, but also a lot of other stuff that he cares about immensely. I'm not trying to say this in any kind of demeaning way. It's just like that it's kind of unprecedented, so I don't really have the words for it. Is the point to make money off of this and it's just a business and like that there's not more to that? Is the point of this to all ultimately build a fan base and hopefully make the Wizards a more attractive place for free agents to help them win championships? Like how do the pieces interplay here? What is the top line, highest item catch-all point?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't think it's cynical to say that the catch-all point is to make more money and
it's a business. More power to them.
Yeah, build this thing even greater. I think along the way, it's probably introducing fans of the Capitals and Wizards to these other entities that's part of the MSC network, right? I mean,
should we just start calling it the MSC multiverse? Like, can we own this, Scott? Can you and I come up with the term?
Let's do it. Are we going to care about Wizards District Gaming? We do.
We care about all of it. That's the only way we can actually that it could get credence. I want internal people to be using this term. I want Leonsis to hear it and go, damn it, I wish I thought of that. And then I want him to pay us for it because I also would like to make money.
The MSC multiverse, owners of everyone but the Commanders in DC.
That's the goal anyway. Nationals, they're coming.
I mean, that kind of seems like where it's headed, and I think, kind of echoing what I said earlier, I think a lot of people would see today's news and be like, what the heck are they investing into a linear channel, an RSN, given, how many people are cutting the cord and what's happening with RSNs around sports these days. But I really think this is kind of a precursor to the greater investment on the digital side and some, pretty great things for cord cutters in terms of finally being able to whether it's maybe you can buy just a season's worth of Capitals games if you're not that into the Wizards. I'm not sure that that's coming, but that seems like certainly a possibility. But yeah, I just think the digital side and what they do with that and the announcements that are to come are kind of where this thing is going.
Yeah, it's so interesting as someone who is, I guess technically I'm a cord cutter. I don't have a cable subscription, but I have Fubo TV. It's just the one that I got, your YouTube TVs, your Hulus, your whatevers. And I had this discussion 2 months ago, I think it was, with John Allerand. And it's like, are we just all headed back to cable? And I think this is a pretty, if we zoom out even more, this could be actually a kind of important inflection point, because if they can create something where you veer away from this vicious circle we seem to be on, where we all got rid of cable and then we're mad that we can't watch all the stuff that we want without a cable subscription and this other thing, and we just wind up paying more for a worse experience. If they can actually make this a better experience, this would seem rather important in the larger landscape of media.
Yeah, no, I think absolutely. I mean, I'm one of the people who feels held hostage by MASN, and that I only have cable so that I can watch the Nationals and Orioles every night. It's ridiculous. Because I have streaming subscriptions on top of that out the wazoo. And yeah, I think, I mentioned the Clipper Vision earlier, and a $200 price tag kind of sounds ridiculous, but no one's forcing you to pay it. And if you can go to the diehard Clippers fans, and in this case, the diehard Wizards fans, and say, hey, it's going to be $152 for the season, a lot of people would happily pay it. You make money, they're happy, you're happy, all sorts of, programming options delivered directly to them, people that are fans. I think it's kind of painful right now, but I think we're headed to a better place. And, we'll see how the leagues continue to grapple with this. We just saw the Utah Jazz, take kind of a drastic approach and create their own production company and announce that they're putting games on, Bunny Ears TV starting next year.
Yeah.
So lots of different avenues and things that teams are exploring to try to respond to the changing landscape, and Monumental is right there with them. I
just hope that they run media companies better than media companies have run media companies. Because as someone in the industry, do I necessarily want to work for a team? No, because there is, even if you're told hey, you have carte blanche, you can do whatever you want, it is always in the back of your head that ultimately you might be criticizing the person who signs your check. That is a part, or his most important employee, who's way more important to the company than you. So the idea that all of this is shifting to teams is, I think, ultimately not a good thing. But they've got other revenue streams that media companies don't. Media companies have to make money on media, and Monumental can make money on basketball and then do media. And I just unfortunately don't see I feel like this is a trend that's just going to continue, and it's not one that's necessarily going to, if you agree with the premise that I've put forward here, get better.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I think it's something that, I and my colleagues, Ben Strauss has written extensively on this, going to continue to watch. And I think there'll be chances to kind of check back in with Monumental Sports Network going forward once this thing does launch and things get rolling this season to see, just kind of what level of involvement there is and what type of editorial oversight there is and how, fans react and, whether it's obvious from tuning into a Wizards or a Capitals game that the game it's being broadcast on is owned and operated by the owner of the teams involved.
Yeah. All right. Last thing, real quick. When you're working on something for later in the week, longest tenured athletes in DC, with Bradley Beal exiting after 11 years. I'm not gonna ask you to give away the whole list. We want people to go get you the click. But what's the most surprising name that came up as you compiled the list? You couldn't believe that guy was that high, or that lady was that high on the list.
Let's see. I've got some honorable mentions in here, and I'll mention one of those that I'm surprised has already kind of cracks the top 10 to 15 is Jonathan Allen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's surprising at all to you.
I don't know. I covered John when I was on the beat, and that feels like it was 78 jobs ago for me, even though it was only like 2. So
right.
That one's for personal reasons not as surprising, I guess. But he's still young, so yeah, I guess that's surprising.
I will say the top 3 are Caps. Mm-hmm. Number 4 is Steven Strasburg. And then number 5 is a soccer player, and I think you can probably guess who it is. Debuted on April 14th, 2013.
Oh, yeah, that would be Torrey Huster.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
Second overall pick, or second round pick, right? It's the second pick of the Spirit in their inaugural year.
Yeah, and she's been here literally ever since. Yeah. No, that's okay. That makes me feel a little bit better because, Torrey has, I was thinking that we were going to be top 5, and all of a sudden we are going to be athletes that debuted in 2015, 2016. So
thankfully not quite there yet, but
not quite. Okay. All right. Scott Allen, make sure you read that piece later in the week and all the coverage of the Monumental sports stuff. Really great piece, really interesting quotes from Zach Leonsis. Read it at WashingtonPost.com/sports. Scott, always a pleasure, sir. And I'm sure we'll be talking again soon.
Absolutely, Craig. Thanks for having me.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. So we got a trade. Kristap Porzingis is headed to the Celtics. In fact, it's very official, Essig. I don't know if you know how we do business around here when there's breaking news, but we have a sounder and everything. You ready?
Breaking news. Oh, snap. News is broken. Breaking news.
Yeah, that's right. We got breaking news. Danny Rouillet is going to pop on the show in a moment. Of course, they got Nats baseball over on the Fan today, so we'll get to Danny in just a second. But I want to give you the lay of the land of the trade first. It's a 3-team deal. It is similar to what we saw or what we tried to lay out earlier, but a couple of other pieces going in different directions. Porzingis is going to opt into his $36 million player option to make the trade happen. They have to figure out a couple of other things. Boston's Danilo Gallinari is in the deal. Malcolm Brogdon is going to go to the Clippers from the Celtics. LA would then send Marcus Morris, Amir Coffey, and the 30th pick to Washington. According to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN, side still have more work to do on an agreement. So the biggest, most important thing here to understand on a baseline fundamental level, Kristap Porzingis is going to the Celtics. Salary filler and the 30th pick are coming back to Washington. I will say this, and I'm going to try to recreate this trade on the old tool real quick to try to make sure I have this all right in front of me. But, I don't really understand what the Clippers are doing here. Giving up the 30th pick for Malcolm Brogdon. I guess, he's got 2 years left. It's an affordable contract. They do need a point guard, and Brogdon is a shot creator and a defensive guy. But I was surprised that the team that is trading for Kristap Porzingis didn't have to give up a draft pick, and the Clippers did. But, hey, it's better for the Wizards, so count your blessings and move on forward. You get the 30th pick in what is a loaded 2023 NBA draft. Of course, coverage tomorrow night. 6:30 on both stations, the Team 980 and 106.7. The Fan over there, it follows a little show called Grant and Danny, and the co-host of that show, Danny Rouillet, joins us from outside the building right now. Danny, what's up, man?
What do you say, my friend?
Chris, hey, did you hear? Kristap Porzingis got traded.
I did. Wheeling and dealing. These Wizards are what's the word? What's the term I'm looking for? Not waiting around, my friend. This is Fast and Furious, like the movies that Grant goes to on opening night, where Vin Diesel grunts about family. It's all happening, man.
It is, and the Wizards get a first-round pick back from Porzingis. That's exciting.
Yep.
Before we move on from the kind of the move forward era, when you look back at the Kristap Porzingis era, it's actually one that I think I look back on, obviously the basketball around it was bad, but Porzingis himself, good Wizard. You kind of hey man, that dude played hard, played a lot more than I think we thought he did, and he played better than I think a lot of people thought he did.
I agree with everything you just said. Yeah, he was pretty good. You kind of, if you want to get the most out of him, you know this. You watch so much ball, but you kind of have to cater to him. You got to do certain sets. You got to, run your offense a certain way if you want to utilize that skill set. And when he was available, 65 games, I would have lost that in an over-under about how much Porzingis would actually play. But he was pretty darn effective. That mid-post, a lot of times against smaller players, he was outstanding from there. Getting buckets over shorter guys, stretching the floor at times, blocking some shots on that end. Just a pretty effective player who kind of rejuvenated his career. He was always kind of, not I would say always, but for the last several seasons, sort of bouncing around, an afterthought. If Porzingis is healthy, was almost a required precursor. Now you're talking about a guy who could be an asset for a few teams, it seems like.
Yeah, and that's the thing is ultimately, yes, you turn what was it, Spencer Dinwiddie and Davis Bertans. That
yep.
is the thing that, I guess in a way Tommy started. That was a good thing. There was obviously other issues, but that Tommy started and that ultimately, Winger and Dawkins are putting into absolute warp speed is they are now out from what was the worst contract situations in the entire league. Wall's contract,
yep.
Beal's contract, some of that was self-inflicted, obviously. The Davis Bertans contract was awful. They're out of all of it now, and they actually have legitimate flexibility moving forward.
I think that's the exciting part. It really is a blank canvas. The analogy I used the other day, Craig, was you're looking at this house where you've got some memories, and it's not the nicest house on the block, and you want to make it that. Well, you got to come up with a wrecking ball at some point, and they did the wrecking ball move once they moved on from Bradley Beal. I think that was the most essential part of it. But, the Grunfeld staple was to trade away assets, picks, anything worth the damn just to stay kind of in that middle. It was better with Tommy Shepard. It wasn't good enough by any stretch of the imagination. Don't get me wrong, and I like Tommy personally. But it was, okay, we're not giving up first-round picks elections, but we're just not going to get much out of them. And, I mean, you look at the run from basically Bradley Beal back in 2013, it's a, palm meets forehead type situation about, kind of a graveyard of also-rans in the NBA or guys that aren't here anymore or some players they didn't get much out of, et cetera. So that's the part that has to change more than anything else if they want to get established as this destination city that Ted Leonsis envisioned when he gave Bradley Beal that ridiculous contract and even more ridiculous no-trade clause.
Yeah, Danny Rouillet, of course, Grant Danny on 106.7 The Fan. They got Nats baseball over on The Fan today, so nice enough to join us over here on the Team 980 and talk through this Kristaps Porzingis trade. So then the question I'm sure you guys have gotten on your show, I've gotten it on mine. I'm curious your answer to it is like, what's next? Like, what do the Wizards actually do from here? What's your theory of the case?
It's a great question. To me, again, we're talking blank canvas, but remember, new CBA basically says you got to spend at least 90% of the salary cap, right? And they'll be below that now with Kuzma opting out, Porzingis gone. Very mild salary coming back. I think Gallinari's north of 6. I want to say Marcus Morris is in the 17 range.
6.8 for Gallo. Coffey's 3.6. Did you know, Danny, there's an NBA player named Amir Coffey who make $3.6 million over the next couple of years?
I'm going to pretend I knew that all along, and that's something I learned this afternoon when I Googled Amir Coffey. And obviously Chris Paul's deal's on the books, but I think that's going to get spun for something at some point. I don't know when. So maybe they end of the year with him just to keep that salary number up. But they're not looking for long-term commitment right now. They are looking for young pieces. I mean, to me, I know it sounds laughable to say for an organization that hasn't won diddly or squat in a long time, but I kind of look at Orlando, Craig, as the model, where they don't know what they are yet. But they got a bunch of 22-year-olds that are going to keep throwing kids at the wall to see who's a build-around. I think they know in Banchero, certainly. But, find a couple other guys like that where they're just adding endless sort of wings, and we'll see if something shakes out of it, right? I think maybe you look to that sort of model or, obviously what Oklahoma City's been able to do. You found your superstar in SGA. But other than that, they drafted a bunch of position-versatile, high IQ basketball guys like Giddey and Jalen Williams and also Jalen Williams. But, that sort of thing, I think, is what's kind of coming next. I don't think they're in a rush from that standpoint. They're in a rush to make the canvas blank. You could see that now, right? Within a week, they've had seismic shifts in philosophy, in personnel, certainly kind of the linchpins of the organization here for the last couple of seasons and longer in Beal's case. Those guys are gone. They're in a hurry to wipe the slate clean, but I don't think they're going to be in a hurry necessarily to go all in on the first shiny object that kind of comes their way. To me, this is now about building this culture, building the org, finding a couple of young pieces so you can make yourself into that position where you've got enough assets. And, when the distressed team that can't pay fill-in-the-blank star, starts to have to sort of look, when Utah starts moving on from the Donovan Mitchells of the world, maybe you're in a position to do that. Or maybe you find the superstar that wants to play with one of your young guys. You've got to build this into a cool NBA city first. Then you could start talking about, adding some of those pieces to be able to put you over the top in the Eastern Conference.
No doubt. And, I love that you brought up the Orlando example because I feel like, I've been guilty of this too. Everyone's fixated on Oklahoma City. It's like, it'll look something like what Oklahoma City did. But because Oklahoma City's teardown involved getting the greatest asset haul in the history of the league, it's a terrible comparison. You got every pick the Clippers were legally allowed to give you and a future first-team All-NBA guy we now know in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. They did not know that at the time. Nice, pleasant surprise. But Orlando has just drafted well. I'm like, what a concept, especially here. What a concept that you get the number one pick and it comes in a year where Paolo Banchero looks like he could grow into best player on a championship team type of player. Still got a long way to go, but he's real damn good. And I feel like that's actually the model, Danny, is they just now have to say, we're not going to give up any more assets. We're going to do this right. We have to scout well. And I will say, when you look at some of the picks that have been made by the two lead executives here, nevertheless, Travis Schlenk and what he's done in Golden State and Atlanta, I feel far more confident in their ability to do that than obviously when Shepard was here.
100%, and I think that's key. I mean, listen, people are going to bring when you hear Travis Schlenk, they're going to bring up Trae Young for Luka Doncic. That's fine, but it's not as if Trae Young isn't an all-star.
Trae Young's still
you know?
awesome.
He's
Trae
still
Young's
really,
better
really
than
good.
any basketball player that has played in Washington D.C. since who?
Since Arenas?
Probably. I mean, John had some
Maybe?
pretty damn good years. I guess that's probably the answer. Is like peak John, but it didn't last very long. The peak.
No, it certainly didn't. Yeah, he took years off his career, basically careening in the defenders and playing like a demon on both ends in that team that got Kelly Olynyk out of the postseason.
Yeah.
But to your point, there are some feathers in the cap of both those guys. You know, whether it was Schlenk himself in Atlanta, you know, the Sam Presti Brain Trust for Dawkins and company. There's certainly philosophy there, and it's going to be interesting to me, Craig, as a nerd of this sort of stuff. You know, obviously Dawkins is higher on the food chain, so what he says goes. But in terms of team building and philosophy, you know, you look at the picks Atlanta made, finding guys like Kevin Huerter, who obviously end up thriving elsewhere, but the DeAndre Hunters of the world and some of these athletic wings that Atlanta kind of went for versus, you know, we've already sort of referenced in Oklahoma City, the Josh Giddeys of the world, the Chet Holmgrens, the guys that don't necessarily look like everybody else, but move well, are big for the position, have high basketball IQ, and are a little bit more versatile. Maybe they lack an elite skill set in one place or another, but we can sort of find something to do with them. Now, that all centers, of course, on finding your own version of an SGA, and that's not here yet. And maybe it will be someday, but you're looking for some certain attributes at this point. And number 8 is such a dependent spot in the draft, but I think they're right now going to throw numbers at the problem. I think they want as many picks as possible to stockpile as many assets as possible. They'll pick the ones they want to build around, and then they'll be able to say, here's some things that you guys might want, talking about the rest of the league, in a couple of seasons. Who's not going to want a knockdown shooter that's not an embarrassment on defense, that moves without the basketball on Corey Kispert? That's a great asset to have, you know, come trade deadline time for a lot of contending teams, you know, something like that. Maybe you want a good on-ball defender who can also play a little point forward in a season or two. There's Denny Avdia. So you're basically accumulating as many assets as you can without taking yourself out of the ability to get more assets, which is the Grunfeld special, and really the Tommy special, by winning too many games. You're going to be bad. You embrace the bad. You're finding as many pieces as possible to A, build around, and B, continue to stockpile future assets.
No doubt. I don't know why contenders aren't ringing their phone off the hook for DeLon Wright. Like, give me that dude as my backup point guard.
No, that's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah.
I don't know why his name is not, just because he's not a sexy name is probably why it's not talked about more. But if I'm like Golden State and I might lose Dante DiVincenzo, I'm calling the Wizards yesterday about DeLon Wright. And then,
that's
of
a sharp
course,
one, yeah.
Monte Morris on the block as well. You guys will get to talk about this. You're on late tomorrow after more afternoon nationals, correct?
Yeah, with this weather notwithstanding, this whole thing is so weird. It was supposed to be pouring, and it's kind of not, but it kind of is. Tomorrow, who knows what the forecast is? Yeah, but we're supposed to be on after the Nats play at 1 o'clock.
Which, of course, is a game that was suspended by weather. That's why there's a Nationals game tomorrow.
That's right. Put domes on stadiums.
Yeah. All right. I'll see you tomorrow, buddy. Thank you.
See you, brother.
Danny Rouillet, everybody. Grant and Danny, 106.7 The Fan, weekday afternoons. Listen to their podcast and listen to us live. Or listen to they're on the same time as me. What do you want to say? Listen to their show between 2 and 4. Screw Chris Russell. Matt, don't tell him I said that. Oh, no. I did that on the day that Essig's here and everything.
I was about to say, because you're also ignoring me if you ignore Chris.
Never listen to Grant and Danny.
Listen to them at 7 o'clock when you got free time and all the programming.
You ready?
Over here
You ready? I'm going to save this right now.
Go for it.
You can listen to them using the rewind feature on the free Odyssey app.
Look at you.
Professional. I kid you not, my phone just started ringing. I was like, which boss is calling me mad? All right, let's skip trending. When we get back, a little more reaction to the Kristap Porzingis trade. Then never read the comments coming up here on the Team 980.
You can listen to the
right, it's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up at the top of the hour, it is that time of week. 6 o'clock Wednesday means never read the comments. In the meantime, just a little bit of cleanup on the Kristap Porzingis trade. It is still not done, as we told you. Adrian Wojnarowski reporting that the basic structure is this. Boston will get Kristap Porzingis. Washington gets Danilo Gallinari from Boston. And then Marcus Morris, Amir Coffey, and the 30th pick in tomorrow night's draft from the Clippers. The Clippers get Malcolm Brogdon. The Celtics are going to have to give up picks here. The question is, what picks? Are they going to give up future firsts? Are they going to give up some seconds? And thanks to our buddy and friend of the show, Neil Dalal, Hoop District, who tweeted at me and said there's a good chance that those picks might be dependent on whether Porzingis signs an extension in Boston. So what it might be is a second that turns into a first if Porzingis signs an extension, or 1 second that turns into an additional second if Porzingis signs an extension. But ultimately, Boston is going to have to give up picks, and the Wizards are going to stack even more assets in return. But the baseline of the deal is what's important to get done. The rest, the cake is there. They've got to dress it. But they at least made the cake. It's apparently a coffee cake. Because Amir Coffey's in the... I hate myself for that.
I like that one. That one was clean. I mean, explaining it afterwards, maybe not your best moment, but...
I mean, would people have gotten it?
Let's just say that's a self-chuckle, you know? That joke wasn't really meant for everyone. It's just for the ones that are really paying attention.
I was in If You Know, You Know, and then I made everyone know, and I ruined the joke.
It happens.
Yeah. Probably happens to me more often than it should. Damn. Anyway, the point is, the basic structure, the hard part, the math that needs to math, they got the math part figured out. And that's obviously very exciting. Wizards can finalize this trade hopefully later today, if not tomorrow. And that way they can actually make the pick. The Beal trade's the one that I don't know. I don't know if the Beal trade gets finalized tomorrow or whether they play this out. It'll get finalized next week if it's not done tomorrow, because they need to get it done before the end of the league year, which is June 30th, 6 p.m. So next Friday. By the way, heck of a week for me to be out. I'll come back and all the free agency stuff. I'll tell you this, Matt. I was terrified that the Beal trade was going to go down when I was gone. I'm gone Tuesday through Friday next week. I come back on Monday, July 3rd. We will recap all the chaos of the weekend of free agency. Be off for July 4th. And I'll come back and see what else happened on the 5th. But I am just happy, personally, selfishly, that this got done this week. And really, Kuzma's the last one left to figure out what they're going to do with him. And that we're not going to know until at least next Friday.
Yeah, that one also, I mean, given, you want to know the information, but that's not as much of a killer as Beal and everyone else. These were definitely the leading, what's going to happen, how can we figure out what the future of the team. We knew that Kuzma wasn't going to be, so like,
well, the thing is, though, Kuzma's a free agent, right?
Yeah.
So, like...
That's a move that we expected, though. So
well,
that's
and you know, he still could be a sign and trade.
Oh, yeah.
But it can't get done till free agency.
No.
Now, Porzingis on the player option, Capiche, done, and obviously Beal, many years remaining, now off to Phoenix.
A lot of the loose ends are starting to get tied up.
Yes. And then you get that's the foundation to ultimately build on. And I'm sure that'll be part of the questions that we deal with next. Never read the comments time. Next, we go deep down into the darkest parts of the internet, the comments section. Find out if we come out alive. Next on The Hoffman Show. Hey, I'm Craig. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do in half an hour when we're done with Never Read the Comments. There is a chance that we play for you a portion of the James Smith-Williams interview that Logan and I did this morning. We also might talk a little bit more about the Porzingis trade if we hear some more of the final details. Matt, as I look over your shoulder on television, Woj is there talking, so I'm sure he and Shams are neck and neck reporting this thing out. So we'll see kind of where the news takes us in half an hour. However, right now it is time to do something that's become a bit of a tradition, a staple, if you will, more of a staple than a tradition. It's something we do with intent. We put on our hazmat suits and we just ignore the advice that everyone's given us, all the responsible adults that tell you, feel free to post whatever you want on the internet. Maybe even just turn the comment section off. Whatever you do, though, whether it's Twitter, Instagram, certainly on YouTube, don't read the comments. And every week, what do? This is the part where Anthony normally does like a big spiel, so I'm going to see what I can do. We read those comments, baby. I'm going to have to send that to Anthony and see how I did. Normally, he stands up and everything. I'm old. I didn't want to stand up.
I added a little bit of jazz hands on my side, so.
Thank you. Muchas gracias. Merci beaucoup.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get into it. Let's see what we got. And Essig, I actually took, so earlier in the show, in an effort to show just how difficult it is to put together a three-team trade, especially when you got two teams that are over the tax line, which the Clippers and Celtics are, we actually pulled up a trade machine on the show, especially for the folks that were watching on YouTube. You could see what I was doing. But we did it, obviously, on the radio as well. Hopefully, I explained it well. And we created the trade. We got close. Danilo Gallinari wound up going to the Wizards instead of the Clippers, which is interesting. We did not have Amir Coffey in the trade. And better for this trade's better for the Wizards because you also get the 30th pick in the draft. But it kind of showed the exercise of what Dawkins and Winger and all the Cap folks and all these teams are doing. Well, we already have a comment on it. Actually, we have a couple comments on it. This one in particular caught my eye from Biggie Steve, 6973, because I had some second-rounders in this. He goes, I'm tired of all these damn second-round picks. If we keep getting second-rounders, fire the front office. Essig, when did they get hired?
I believe it was this year.
Yeah. In fact, I think it was this month.
Yeah, it's been recent.
Yeah. A little patience and also understanding of markets. This is where I think fans in general are the worst. Actually, no, this is where they're the second worst. When fans forget about the humanity of players, that's when they're the worst. When you look at them as non-human objects that are meant to be either dancing for your entertainment or just traded around, and there's no humanity in the discussion of players, coaches, the fact that these are human beings trying to do their jobs, even if there are high standards and all the thing. That's when fans are at their worst. The second worst, which is honestly more annoying because the other one's a little bit more serious and is a larger reflection of society, is a lack of understanding of markets. Every fan thinks their guy's worth a first-rounder. The other comments that are on that video right now were like, trade up for Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller. What the hell do the Wizards have that makes you think they can trade up for the second or third pick in this draft? Are you kidding? What? Brain explodes. We, in the city of the District of Columbia, do not have the assets attached to our basketball team to get Scoot Henderson or Brandon Miller with the second or third pick. Charlotte would laugh you off the phone for 2, and Portland would laugh you off the phone for 3. The best thing you could do is give Portland, which this was an option till a couple of hours ago, Porzingis, the 8th pick, and a future first that would have to be super caveated because you can't trade future firsts because you owe a future first to the Knicks. You can't even trade multiple first-round picks. If you said Porzingis plus 8 plus the next first-round pick we're allowed to give you after the Knicks pick conveys, then fine. But other than that, you're not getting it. You're not getting that pick. And I would also say this. Don't be in such a rush to rebuild. These things take time. If you get Scoot, if you get Brandon Miller, if you get whoever, you're still going to suck for 3 years. So you don't have the infrastructure around them. Take your time. Get assets. Have a little patience. Yeah, second-round picks are annoying, but sometimes once in every 75 years of the NBA, they turn into Nikola Jokic. That's going to be my new because that's such a dumb count. You never know. It could be Nikola Jokic. Oh, you mean the one time it's worked like that in the history of the whole bleeping league? But at least it would shut the fan up who's being annoying about it. Could be Nikola Jokic. You never know. Yesterday, to start the show, we took a look back on Ted Leonsis talking about Bradley Beal and the no-trade clause last year, and also what Michael Winger and Will Dawkins said, when they were hired a couple of weeks ago, earlier this month, as established. Perez Johnson 508 on the Winger-Dawkins video said, Winger gave the most analytical and straightforward answer. He didn't sing Beal's praises and end up looking sort of silly. He just laid out the facts, but also highlighted how having a star makes you operate in a very distinct fashion. Will Dawkins is smart. I really trust him a lot. I thoroughly enjoyed talking to him. He also understands the game. Him getting out and saying Bradley Beal, yeah, we can't wait to trade him. He's not, or like even he's not that good. That would have been bad. Matt, could you have imagined if when you were there with us, what would your face have done? What would your reaction have been if Will Dawkins had been like, yeah, like he's fine?
Honestly, it would have been immediately on the phone to whoever was back at the studio with, you got to clip that, and that's going to be sent out to everyone, because that's the take of the century right there.
Right, which would have been accurate, but you don't hear it. You hear it from me. You hear it from the talk show host. Yeah. You don't hear it from the NBA general manager.
Not from the executive.
Especially someone who's trying to pump up his value in a trade.
Yeah.
So I understand why Will Dawkins was like, hey, there's no decision to be made on Bradley Beal. He's under contract. He's awesome. But, like, Michael Winger's the man in charge. Will Dawkins still has to report to Michael Winger, too. And Winger as the man in charge just was like, he knew the score. He knew what was up. He's like, Bradley's a really good basketball player. I understand he's important to the franchise. But, like, if we get to this point, we'll do what we got to do. And I appreciated his answer. And it's not dissimilar from what he gave a couple years ago when he was talking about a trade he had made and kind of the humanity of it. Ironically, it was a season ticket holder event with Rachel Nichols, who has a new show coming to Monumental Sports Network, apparently, which is actually a great get for Monumental. Rachel's dismissal from ESPN was weird in a lot of ways. I don't want to litigate it at all, but like she's very good at her job. And having her interview DC athletes, I think, is good for all of us. Anyway, point is, I think that Winger's willingness to say two things really struck me when we sat down with him. One, running the team back as constituted would not be a wise endeavor. And two, when you get to a point where you realize you can't win with a star and there's no way to get there, it's time to move on. And I don't think there's any harm in saying that. It did not cause the waves that perhaps even it should have in the interviews that day. Those quotes did not blow up. But in hindsight, people look back and they're like, oh, I guess he kind of did tell Hoffman and Russell that we might get to this point. Never read the comments here on the Hoffman Show, where we go into our YouTube comments, find the most interesting ones, respond to them live here on the radio. Of course, live streaming on YouTube as well, youtube.com/@theteam980. Ted Leonsis in his comments that we started the show with yesterday, we rewound a year. And, hey, what did Ted say when he introduced Bradley Beal with that 5-year contract and was asked about the no-trade clause? Michael said, I feel like he is searching for that relationship with his players on the NBA side like he has with the Caps and players like Ovi and Backstrom. That is 100% correct and has been the case all along. And I think what Ted ultimately has realized and took him too long to realize is either one of two things or both things. I don't know whether it's one of two or both are true. But the two things that he ultimately came to the conclusion of that are undeniable truths are, one, basketball and hockey are different businesses. The way you operate a basketball team is not the same way you operate a hockey team on the sporting side. There are certainly things from a business side that you can probably carry over. There are certainly truths that I think are true along all sports. But the way you build a hockey team is different than the way you build a basketball team. And perhaps even more important than that, it took way too long to realize just because someone's your best player doesn't mean that they should be your best player. Alex Ovechkin is worthy of being a best player on a championship team because he's one of the, 15 greatest hockey players ever, 10 best, 5 best. I don't know. I'm not a hockey guy. I just know that dude's awesome, and he scored more goals than anyone outside of Wayne Gretzky. So, I don't know. Is he top 5 ever?
Yeah, I'd put him Rushmore.
Yeah.
He's got to be Rushmore.
Yeah, he's...
Especially if you're a fan of the the Caps.
Yeah, like, I have no problem putting him up there. Wayne Gretzky's not even on Rushmore. Wayne Gretzky's on, like, sitting above Rushmore. He's so far and away the best hockey player ever. It's gross.
He's perched on Everest.
Yeah. Like, so it's Gretzky, it's like Gordie Howe, it's, the Mark Messier's, Crosby was obviously amazing, Ovechkin. Like, he's on the list, right? Bradley Beal made one All-NBA team. It was a third team. One time. And so if you hitch your wagon to the wrong guy, you're in deep poop. And so if you just treat Beal or Wall the same as Ovechkin, you made a mistake. And I think that was the mistake that Ted made is like, and I've said this many times. I look at Ted as someone who looks at sports way more humanely than most people. He sees the people involved as opposed to doing the thing that I railed against earlier in the segment that fans do and that owners often do as well, is they just look at, at players as assets that can be moved around willy-nilly. Ted doesn't look at it like that. And I appreciate that about him on a human level. But when you just say, like, oh, no, these are our stars, Beal and Ovechkin, and you treat them the same, you're not going to get the same results. And unfortunately, that is a defining factor of the last decade of Wizards basketball. As for people being mean to Bradley Beal, this one was rough. This segment was rough on the radio, Matt, yesterday.
I was about to say, it was a toughie to get through, and when I saw the comments for this one, whoo!
Yeah, it was not good. So do Wizards fans actually have any Bradley Beal memories? User XB6RN7QY2. I think that's his Wi-Fi password.
And maybe his or the actual IP address also.
Hey, is that what an IP address looks like? No, IP addresses are like 1.9, whatever. My only memories of Beal is him slipping on banana peels late in the fourth quarter all the time and costing us games. It was something out of Cartoon Network with that guy. Paper tags. My most prominent memory of Beal is him being embarrassed after Wall told him he jumped on the scorer's table after hitting that game-winning 3 versus Boston in Game 6. Dominic Hudson, 9079 says, yes, we do. The main memory I have is him turning the ball over in crunch time. There were a lot of late game turnovers for Bradley Beal. It became a problem. And, the first guy talking about like Cartoon Network, like it's one of those things that I don't think at the beginning was necessarily true. Like the numbers didn't back the narrative. Last couple of years, it was like, okay, is he like, he's had a couple of late game snafus, but like he's also had a couple of late game big shots, big, game winners, game tying shots, like big moments right past, drive kick to Kuz in the corner. Like, don't kill him. And then he just kept turning it over. And it like last 5 minutes of games, he had a stretch last year that was just awful. And it was like cartoonish where he would just dribble the ball off his foot. And you're like, you don't even give us a chance, man. At least get a bad shot up. That could go in. And it became real bad. They'd say in Philadelphia, it was really, really bad. Nothing out of you on that one, Essek?
I was trying to look up the stats for how many turnovers he had last season. Couldn't pull it out fast enough. But, yeah, no, it was just...
Not good.
No, it's bad. 5-11. It's not good.
Yeah. That like Philly accent you just did, it was pretty good. Bad. Really,
It's
really
bad.
bad. The real cost of Bradley Beal's no trade clause was talking about the diminished value they got. And this is one of the funniest comments we got. Ishmael JRP1 says, if I was an NBA player, I'd have no trade clauses in all my contracts. Even if I have to give up salary in exchange during negotiations, the concept of getting traded without your final say is bonkers to me. Ishmael, no, you wouldn't. Because if Steph Curry can't get one, neither can you. And frankly, unless you are a max player willing to play on the minimum, you're not getting that no trade clause in return. Now, I will say, to your larger point, we've talked multiple times now in this 15 minutes about how players are tradable assets in the eyes of many, whether it's fans, owners, whatever. And to an extent, we have to do that because that's the system in which they exist. It is kind of crazy. And it's not the way it is in other places. Like, this is a uniquely American sports thing. The draft, try explaining the NBA or NFL draft to a European soccer fan, and they will look at you like you have 13 heads.
Wait, you get better because you were bad? What?
Well, not even that. Try to explain the player side of it.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, hey, you're the best young player in the world, and it's time to turn professional, and some team just gets to pick you?
Yep.
You don't have any say of where you go? Like, and I realize it's a very different system because, like, the best young footballers, best young soccer players in the world are playing in academies from the time they're 12 years old. And so, like, you maybe you go to the Barcelona. If you're Messi, you get recruited from Argentina. You go to Barcelona when you're 12. You play in the youth academy. Eventually, you make the senior team at 17 or whatever he did, and you're there for almost 20 years. Like, okay, fine. That part is different versus, like, a college system. The best players in, if you want to play college soccer and you're a great European young player, you come to America to play college soccer. There's no university, like, intercollegiate athletics over there.
Honestly, the closest thing I can think of is it's kind of like the minor league system in baseball. How you get picked up by a team or you join a team and you have to go through all the systems to get up to the point where you're actually playing.
Right. And if you're not Messi, if you're not Ronaldo, if you're not David Beckham, if you're not the best of the best, the young players now, your Jude Bellinghams, your Folarin Balagans, etc. Like, you're not. You might have to play in a tier 3 and then work your way up to tier 2, tier 1, etc. And maybe you make your Premier League debut a little later, 23, 24. But most of the time, honestly, like, Premier League players are guys that have been playing in the top flight, or that maybe you're not English and you go play in the Dutch league because you're Dutch, and then eventually you get signed by an English club by the time you're 23, 24. So, whole point being, the fact that players have no say is a very uniquely American thing. The draft is uniquely American. The concept of trades, like, there are transfers in international sports, international soccer specifically is the biggest one. But, like, the player decides, I want to go there, and then the teams work out the finances. It is bizarre because these are the best players in the world. And the fact that they have very little agency, and even after they get drafted, right? It basically doesn't make sense to even consider free agency until you're in your 7th or 8th year. And frankly, from a financial standpoint, if you're good enough, it behooves you to never leave unless you demand a trade, but you want to be able to keep the maximum level of raises, which means signing with your incumbent team. It's weird. I planned on making fun of that comment, to be frank, the first part of it when I saw it, because, like, no, you wouldn't do that. You would take all the money, and the best players have the power to force trades and force where they want to go without the no trade clause. See what Kevin Durant did. But, man, it is a wacky thing that we just kind of accept as fact over here. Do I have time for this one? Yeah, I'm going to have to skim this because it's a long one. But last one, speaking of soccer, our interview with Sebastian Salazar yesterday talking about the U.S. men's national team bringing back Greg Berhalter, and this comment from IA3585. I'm going to skim it because it's long, but Berhalter, at least from his last tenure, never used a central number 10, always stuck Reyna out on the wings when he did play, so we didn't really have much central creative playmaking, which we saw how well it worked when Reyna finally played midfield under BJ, talking about the interim coach who helped them win the Nations League title over the weekend. Greg brought in a lot of MLS players that confused most people because of the valuable roster space it used up in the World Cup, which is why our starters were exhausted in the Dutch game, and he lists out a couple of other things, but ultimately winds up with a couple other mistakes that he disagrees with, that I agree with the commenter that they were mistakes. But he says the free-flowing creative football that we saw under BJ, along with simply getting the starting lineup right, was more in line with what supporters wanted to see. And this is my big question for Greg Berhalter moving forward, is can you adapt and change? The U.S. has incredible athletes. That has always been our strength. We have some of the best athletes in the world. The way we do our strength and conditioning here is just superior. You grow up around athletes playing all kinds of sports. A lot of American players played other sports growing up. Now the American roster is very international in terms of where guys grew up, but it's always been a strength. Rarely are you going to find a faster team than Team USA. So playing a free-flowing up-and-down style where you can then take advantage of certain players like a Gio Reyna, Christian Pulisic, who are uber creative, makes a lot of sense. And from a tactics standpoint, it is your job as a National League manager not to do what you do at a club team and establish a system and build it up like you would in a basketball or football team. Like Eric Bieniemy is going to install the offense for the Commanders, and over the next couple of years, as long as he's here, which hopefully is multiple years, he's going to find the players that fit it. If he was taking over a USA football all-star team to take on the world, he would look at the players he had, and he would design a system around them. And that's what you have to do as a national team manager, and that's where I think Berhalter has a lot of room to grow. Hopefully he learned that after things didn't go as well as they could have at the World Cup, but ultimately he's the man in charge, so we'll see. Great stuff from Sebastian yesterday. If you missed it, definitely worth checking out on YouTube. YouTube.com/@Craig Hoffman for videos from me. Full episodes of Take Command, which we also post up at youtube.com/@1067 The Fan. And then more highlights of this show and occasionally others as well at youtube.com/@TheTeam980. That is also where we stream live daily from 4 to 7 p.m. We get back. Let's let you hear a little bit, speaking of Take Command, from James Smith-Williams. Logan and I talked to him this morning. You'll hear it next here on the Team 980.
Celebrate summer in D.C. with the team.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Take command. Give you a little preview of an interview that we did with James Smith Williams. I will say this is, sometimes we'll give you kind of the entire interview and say, hey, there's a little bit more of this, that, or the other thing on the podcast. This is just a snippet of the interview. This is the red meat of the interview. I will say that from a football standpoint. But the reason we had James on is worth listening to. So I will please, I will go as far as begging you to listen to the rest of this on the Take Command feed. It'll be out first thing tomorrow morning, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. If you're a YouTuber, youtube.com/@1067 The Fan is where full episodes live, and I will put this full thing up on my YouTube page as well. James is a really special person. He does incredibly special work through an organization called Set the Expectation. It is one that is bluntly near and dear to me as well. My wife happens to work with this nonprofit very closely. She's one of 4 employees that they have. And it's a part-time thing for her, but it is an organization that fights sexual and domestic violence through education geared at men, because if women could have solved issues of domestic violence and of sexual violence by now, they would have. So it's clear that we, men, are the solution. We talked to James about the work and why a football camp is part of that work. He is putting on a football camp, and you don't have to be touched by those issues to go to it. I will say, anybody who's got a kid that's listening, 7th through 12th grade, you want a chance to be coached by James Smith Williams, perhaps some of his teammates as well, and some really, really high caliber coaches and fitness professionals. The camp is July 15th. You can email info@settheexpectation.org for more information. So we talked about all of that, the camp, the work, why it's so important to him, how he got involved. If you want to get to know James Smith Williams, it's one of the more extensive interviews I've ever heard him do, and I've listened to a lot of James. We've had James a lot, and he and I have never gone this deep. So really great stuff on Take Command. The part we play for you, though, is, well, the football part. So asked James about how the spring went, and things went on from there.
What'd you make of the spring, the new practice structure and everything that EB brought on the offensive side that kind of shaped how the team came together, and how did you feel like your spring went?
Yeah, I think holistically it's been a great change. I think historically in football, DCs are usually defense coordinators are usually the ones who are, yelling, screaming, really high standards, go, high tempo. I think that's always been the DC role. So it's been nice to look over on the other field and see EB getting after them and screaming and holding them to a really high standard. It's been a nice change for me as a defensive player. But the offense has been great. They've been humming along. You definitely see the systems getting in place. And I think for me, it was a great spring. I think this year was more of a focus on individual, on fundamentals, on technique, and not so much, getting after it when we're doing good on good work. It's been more cooperative, trying to both learn the plays and they're trying to install their system. So it's been a really productive spring.
Is that challenging for you? I mean, I know there's a lot of guys that handle their off seasons very, very differently. OTA specifically, minicamp now, especially with the new CBA. Has it been tough, not seeing any run looks? Has it been tough, not getting any live pass rushes? How's that been for you?
I think the no live pass rushes is fine. I think that's okay. We'll get the camp. We'll kind of knock the dust off. No run looks will be interesting.
Yeah.
Just see how that shakes out when camp comes. I've been used to just getting off the ball. I know it's a pass. I'm just racing up the field and we'll go from there. So I think, when it's run, I have to reel it in a little bit. It'll be a little bit of a change and a little bit of adjustment period. But, camp's very long. We'll have pads on. So, it's not like I haven't played the run for a long time at this point. So we'll get back to the groove of things. It'll be nice. It'll be funny that, the first time that they run a run play in fall camp, I assure you the defensive line will be 80 yards up the field.
Yeah.
So we'll have to rein it back in from there.
Because you've essentially had what is it? I'd say approximately 175 pass rush reps during OTAs and minicamp. And it's just there's been no other looks. There's been no other kind of changes. And so in terms of the mental load, I personally think fitting a run is harder than rushing the pass rusher. Where are you guys at with that? And how much time have you spent on it?
Yeah, I mean, we still talk about it in the film room.
It's good. It's good you talk about it. That's important.
Yeah. We still discuss it. We still drilled it in ND. We did our run stuff. It wasn't straight pass rush. We spent a lot of time on hand placement, striking the bag, 6-inch steps, good pad level. Like we're still discussing it. When we get to camp, we'll be knocking the rust off for sure. But I mean, if that's their offensive philosophy, they want to sling the ball around, whatever they want to do. I don't really know. I don't remember when we played KC all those years ago how they approached it. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes changes things, right? But yeah, I'm full confidence in that staff. Obviously, they're winners, and I mean, what else do you want?
Yeah, the training camp exists for a reason, and it is so long. It was so long as a reporter sitting down there in Richmond covering it. Nevertheless, as you guys actually being out there.
Don't worry, we have a joint practice with the Ravens. I know they like to run the ball, so we get a lot of practice.
You get a lot of looks, man. I do. Yeah. I have a client that works for that sent me some clips, and I was like, "Is this your practice?" And he goes, "Yeah." And it was like 9-on-7 team run, like 4-on-4 pod drill, and I was like, dang, bro, like you guys are really kind of going in a completely different direction than the old Washington Commanders at the moment. So put your mouthpiece in, James. It's going to be a long day.
Yeah, don't worry. Especially the Ravens with pullers and the fullback sets and lead blockers. We're going to get a lot of run looks. We'll knock the dust off.
Yeah, as long as you're ready for mid-September, that's all that matters.
Exactly.
You mentioned something though that I think is interesting because we have obviously spent a lot of time talking about Sam and the quarterback position and trying to evaluate it the best we can given the circumstances of it being OTAs, no pads, no run plays, etc. But when you talk about, hey, I know as soon as the ball snapped, it's pass, I'm up the field, like. How different is that for you guys defensively, and how much harder do you think it was for the other side of the ball to play, considering you guys did not have to even think about the run, nevertheless respect it?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's totally different. Depending on the team we're playing, right, week by week, game plan schemes, it's not often that we're just like, oh, it's pass, and if it's not pass, we'll go from there. So the spring's definitely been very different. So that's been a different approach, and for the offense, it's been probably way more hard because we're not respecting your play action pass blocking. We haven't ran the ball, so why would I respect the play action pass, right? So and they're short setting, and I'm gone because this is good, not a run block. So it's been hard for them, and they've offensive lines had some complaints about what are you guys doing? You don't play the run anymore. I'm like, why?
Why would you?
Yeah. Why would I play the run? For what reason? When we ran the ball? So we've had that conversation. End of the day, we've got a good work in together, and we've all enjoyed the spring, I think, a lot, yeah.
And so, like, what's the, obviously kind of people are in and out during OTAs and minicamp, and that's way different than when I was playing. Obviously, everyone was here kind of all the time, building that fellowship, building that camaraderie, and also kind of getting into the defense. How is it when guys are kind of, you had a trip, you left for a little bit, right? You came back. Like, how has that been? How's that? Maybe you don't know anything different, but how is that kind of group coming together, you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we benefit from playing together for all of us now have been there for 4 years, except for the rookies. We've all played together the entire time, so I know how John plays. I know how Payne plays. They know how I play. They know how Casey plays. They know how Tez plays, Chase plays. Like, we all know how each other plays.
Sure.
So there's not a lot being missing in that regard. And obviously fall camp, that stuff will click into place quickly. And for me, I mean, I think for us to be professionals at this level, I don't really care what you do as long as on Sundays you play well. And I think that's where it matters, where anyone cares about. So, yeah.
There's been obviously a lot of talk amongst us media types about all the contracts, Montez and Chase specifically, but you and Casey also are entering your contract years. Like, is that something that, like, I'm not gonna say, is it on your mind ever? Because, like, of course it is. You're a human being.
Right.
Duh.
Wait,
like,
money? Future?
I'm 1 year into my 2-year deal. I'm like, contract year. Better do some good radio shows for the next 12 months. Like, that's of course. But I guess what I would ask though, James, is like, when does it enter your mind? Is it like when you're on the practice field, are you completely free of it? If you make a mistake, you're like, oh no. Like, how and when does that play into the psychology of being a professional football player?
Yeah.
And Logan, obviously, you have experience with this as well. If you want to touch on that.
So, I mean, I can't speak to the season part. I haven't gotten there yet, but I think for me, it's it's more so been the motivation and a little fuel to the fire in terms of laying the foundation, right? So my approach to practice is going to be really sharp and really crisp. My workouts now, how I train and my downtime, do I want that, I don't know, piece of, do I want a bag of French fries or should I probably eat some greens, right? Like it's the little decisions that I think it affects more for me. I've never made a mistake and been like, oh no, this is a contract year. I shouldn't have made that mistake. Like it's I think it's one of those things, like there's 32 teams out there and, someone's going to value what you do differently than someone else, right? So there's no use in worry about the mistakes. You got to play free and get some production going. I think that's the best approach to have.
Yeah, and for me, like, I don't know, I was so close to it. Like, I was so worried about the day-to-day, those small decisions that James was referencing. I didn't really have time to think, like, big picture because I don't know. I don't think you can, honestly. Like, I mean, like, maybe mid-year you're like, man, I only had, or like I only had 10 catches or something like that, or I only had 5 sacks or whatever that number is. You're like, man, maybe I need to kind of reevaluate what I'm doing. But like big picture, like it's the little decisions. It's like eating an elephant, one bite at a time, and eventually it gets you to your goal, hopefully. And, I played a long time and I had a couple years where it didn't get me my goal. And I was like, man, got to reevaluate this sucker. So it's just part of the deal. You know what I'm saying? So it's an important part of the game, but can't let it consume you because it makes you play tight. It makes you play less effective. So
exactly. It's in the moment, you got to live in the moment. And then hopefully in January, I can hit one of the Payne's sign the check celebration.
I think that's such an interesting and like great answer though that we just don't hear athletes talk about often because it's not like you line up on 3rd and 7. You're like, I got to get the sack here so I get the contract. But it's the little things along the way where you could maybe lose focus. You could maybe let yourself slip a little bit. And it's like, nope. Like, hey, I've got a purpose here. And that sense of urgency, I think, is elevated. Go ahead.
Winning would definitely help out.
Look at you.
True.
Yeah, people who get paid are people who come from winning teams. And, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to win. It never hurts to win.
Yeah. Yeah.
Facts.
Last thing from me, and then Logan, anything else you want to add on the way out? But for if people want to know like what it's like in that D-line room with all those personalities, with all that talent, with everything going on there, how would you describe the D-line room?
It depends on time of year, time of day. Every day is different. It is a lot of personality. It's a lot of talent. It's a lot of jokes. It's a lot of laughter. But at the end of the day, right? Like it's all of that stuff's enjoyed when we're winning, right? So when we went on that run, that room was a lot of fun. We're always a lot of fun, but it's all predicated on us winning and having success. As long as that stuff's going well and we're all cool to lay around and joke and cut up and have a good time. It's a great room, though. I don't know if there's any other room like ours in the league, especially.
a lot of big personalities there.
Yeah.
And so, okay, how about this? Obviously contract year. What's some goal? Do you set goals early in the season, and what is maybe one of those that you'd like to share, and just kind of what are you doing to get there?
Yeah, I have tangible goals. I have a goal board. For me, I have a couple of markers in terms of pass rushing, pressures, hits, things like that, because end of the day, you are aware of what it takes to get you where you want to go. You look at like 6 or 7 sacks, 25, 30 QB hits, but it's also one of those things too where it's my role is shifting on the team, right? With Chase coming back, reps look different, so there's a lot of different things that I have to play out and variables that I'll have to go through and experience as the season goes. There's definitely some tangible things I definitely want to get done. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, good luck with those, man. And good luck with the camp too. Lots of. You're a busy man. You went to Korea. You did a whole bunch of stuff, man. I feel like you're never. Your head's never on the pillow, really.
No, not often. Not often, man. But that's how I like to live. So I got no complaints about it.
Yeah. Well, if you want more information on the camp, settheexpectation.org. You want to sign up, info@settheexpectation.org. And we hope to see kiddos out there July 15th. James, appreciate the time on the pod. Enjoy the rest of your off season. And I guess I'll see you a couple weeks at the camp.
All right, man. Sounds great. Appreciate you.
All right, that's James Smith-Williams on Take Command. Much more from him on the episode that drops first thing tomorrow morning. So subscribe to Take Command wherever you get your podcast. And again, if you want your kid to get coached in football by a bunch of professional football players, email info@settheexpectation.org for more on how to sign up for James's camp. It is free, by the way. Free camp July 15th in D.C. When we get back, real things, real people said, into real microphones.
Here's what's trending on the Team 980.
Nationals playing some baseball through the rainy weather. It is currently a rain delay. They didn't get very far. Rain delay in the top of the first in Philly. It was looking at the wrong score. That is 0-0 Braves and Phillies. As for the Nationals, they are buried somewhere. They won today. There you go. Always love when the home team is buried on the scoreboard. 3-0. It's a final already over at Nats Park. They beat the Cardinals. Biggest story today here in D.C., though, is a trade. Kristap Porzingis headed to Boston. 3-team deal. It is not done yet, but expected to be finalized soon, according to Adrian Wojnarowski of ESPN. First reported by Shams Charania of The Athletic. Wizards would get the 30th pick in tomorrow night's NBA draft. That is the last pick of the first round from the Clippers, who get Malcolm Brogdon from Boston. Wizards also get Marcus Morris and some other vets who are on expiring contracts in return. That's what's trending. I'm Craig Hoffman on the Team 980.
This is DC's home for Maryland.
It's the Hoffman Show. Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Again, tomorrow on the show, we are live at Capital One Arena. In this half-hour block, 6:30 to 7, I'll be with Linnell Willingham and Chris Naki. And then I will hand the baton to them for our night full of draft coverage, which now includes at least 2 Wizards first-round picks. They pick at number 8. They have now acquired or on the verge of acquiring the 30th pick in the draft as well as part of the deal for Kristap's Porzingis, sending him to Boston. That pick is Milwaukee's via the Clippers. So the Clippers, the ones sending that. Malcolm Brogdon headed to L.A. So that is the big trade. We'll talk about it more tomorrow. We'll have Glenn Consor probably on the show tomorrow. Dave Johnson, our Wizard, Chris Miller, like Wizards broadcast folks who will be around over at Capital One Arena. We're hoping to have like Will Dawkins or someone come on the show on Friday. It's also probably, honestly, it might be telling you too much, but it's going to depend in part on whether or not these trades go through and they can talk about them, because those guys are not going to want to do a radio interview where they just have to go, yeah, I can't really talk about that. It's not finalized. And frankly, I don't want to do that radio interview because I don't want to just ignore the elephant in the room. So I'd rather wait until they can talk about it. So we will definitely have Will back on the show fairly soon. How soon? Depends. It depends. Other than that, we hope to see you tomorrow. Doors open at 6:30 over at Capital One Arena for the Wizards draft party. So you can come watch the last half hour of the show, he said. Of course, you can watch the show every day on your television, smart TV. Just open the YouTube app. Make sure you're subscribed to the Team 980. Will be the first video that shows up as we do stream live daily from 4 to 7 on the old YouTube. You know something else we do daily? We end the show with real things real people said in real microphones. It's doing it again, Matt.
Real things.
We're not going to be
incredible.
this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
You know, the irony of that sounder getting real sticky on us, and then Ovechkin going, "We're not going to suck this year," is just...
It's not lost on me.
Chef's kiss. Perfect. No notes. Just wonderful. U.S. Women's National Team named today. Kristy Mewis amongst those on the club. This is from Today's Show this morning. Can't remember what I sent you. Oh, no, I remember what this is from. This is from, Kristy Mewis, sister of Sam Mewis, who hosts a podcast with Lynn Williams called Snacks from Just Women's Sports. Kristy and Lynn are teammates at Gotham FC. Both of them made the World Cup. Sam is not going to be on the World Cup roster because she's hurt. But just a couple of weeks ago, they were talking about on the podcast Kristy making the World Cup and what it would mean if she didn't. Well, good news, she did. But here's the perspective she shared.
If I don't make this World Cup team, this is so deep, but do I feel fulfilled in my career? And that's such a scary thought. Being a bubble player, and then I've also never really won anything. I mean, yes, I won the Challenge Cup, but I've never won an NWSL championship. I've never won a college championship. I just feel being named to this roster, I feel everything that I've done my entire life will have been worth it. This is so deep, I hate it. But that's actually how it feels to me, and maybe it doesn't seem that deep to other people, or maybe it's it's true.
It does.
people who are lock-ins, I think they feel different pressure, whereas I feel this is actually gonna change my life and change how I view my career, and that's really hard to stomach every single day waiting for the roster to come up.
Good news, Kristy, you're on the team. I don't know if I can put in perspective what it means to make a World Cup team, because I never will. This jersey that I'm wearing right now, Ashley Sanchez, is number 2, which I will wear during some of the World Cup, as well as the new one that I ordered today. I had to buy it. They get to go wear it. But what I can say from being an observer is when you make the World Cup team, your life changes forever. You are forever especially if you win one of those players. And so congrats to all the 23 who made it. Can't wait to watch this summer. World Cup 29 days away. We'll see you tomorrow on The Hoffman Show.
The Hoffman Show.